The sensor screens showed nothing unusual. Admiral Torvin reviewed the daily reports from the outer colonies while his officers maintained their posts across the command deck. Another routine patrol shift in the Cassidian Empire's border territories. 300 years of expansion had taught the Empire one simple truth. No force in the galaxy could challenge their supremacy. The first anomaly appeared as a flicker on the long-range scanners. "Sir, we're detecting spatial distortions near the Helvan colony." Lieutenant Parva's voice carried uncertainty rather than alarm. "Distortions happen sometimes. Asteroid fields, solar storms, natural phenomena." Torvin moved to the sensor station without hurry. "Calibrate the equipment. Probably interference from the colony's mining operations." Parva's fingers moved across her console. Her expression changed. "Admiral, the distortions are increasing. Multiple signatures. Very large signatures." Now other officers were looking up from their stations. The command deck's casual atmosphere shifted into something more attentive. "Define large," Torvin said. "Capital ship class. Dozens of them." "No, wait." Parva's eyes widened. "Hundreds. Sir, hundreds of vessels just appeared in our sensor range." "Impossible." The Empire monitored every species capable of building warships. Their intelligence network spanned 200 star systems. No civilization could assemble a fleet that size without detection. "Confirm the readings. Send scout drones immediately." Within minutes, the command deck became a center of controlled chaos. Officers called out reports. Communication channels buzzed with traffic from other Imperial ships. The scout drones launched, their high-speed engines carrying them toward the mysterious fleet. The visual feed came through 20 minutes later. Torvin felt his confidence waver for the first time in decades. The fleet was massive beyond comprehension. Ship after ship filled the displays, each one different from the next. Some were sleek and angular, others bulky and industrial. Their designs followed no unified pattern, no single aesthetic philosophy. But their power signatures made Torvin's blood run cold. Energy readings that shouldn't be possible. Weapon systems that made no sense according to known physics. "This can't be accurate," Counselor Reshna said from behind him. The political overseer had appeared on the command deck, her face tight with concern. "No species has this kind of capability. The readings are accurate." Torvin kept his voice steady. "I've never seen anything like this." A junior officer's voice cut through the tension. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. Put it through." The message was simple, delivered in broken galactic standard with an accent Torvin couldn't place. "Evacuation window. 6 hours. Comply." Silence filled the command deck. Reshna recovered first, her political instincts overriding her fear. "This is an outrage. We don't take orders from unknown forces." "Admiral, destroy them." Torvin ignored her. "Send a response. Demand identification. Ask their purpose in Imperial territory." No response came. The mysterious fleet maintained position, neither advancing nor retreating. The scout drones attempted to move closer for detailed scans. Every drone went dark within seconds. Not destroyed in explosions, just disabled. Their systems shut down by point defense weapons so precise and efficient that Torvin's tactical officers could barely track the targeting sequences. They took out 17 drones simultaneously, the tactical officer reported. Response time was nearly instantaneous. Their computer systems must be incredibly advanced, or incredibly numerous, Torvin thought. He studied the fleet composition again. Different ship designs suggested different builders. Perhaps this was a coalition, multiple species working together. But the coordination was perfect, too perfect for a multi-species force. The Empire's War Council convened via secure channel. Faces appeared on the screens around Torvin, senior admirals and political leaders demanding answers he couldn't provide. "This must be Forerunner technology," one admiral suggested. The Forerunners were legendary, an ancient civilization that supposedly vanished millennia ago. Automated defense systems waking up after centuries of dormancy. "Or a species we haven't encountered yet," another voice offered. "Something for beyond charted space." Reshna's voice carried authority despite her fear. "Whatever they are, We cannot show weakness. The Empire has crushed 12 species into submission. We will not bow to threats from unknowns. Torvin felt the weight of command pressing down on him. His instincts screamed caution. This fleet was different from anything the Empire had faced, but centuries of victory made retreat unthinkable. The Empire's reputation depended on strength and dominance. "I'm ordering the 3rd battle group to intercept," he announced. 47 warships should be sufficient to test their capabilities. The council approved. Reshna smiled with satisfaction. Torvin gave the orders and watched his ships move into position. Hours passed. The mysterious fleet remained motionless. Then, as the 3rd battle group approached weapons range, a single vessel broke formation. It was smaller than a Cassidian destroyer, angular and gray, with no visible decoration or markings. But its power signature matched their largest dreadnoughts. The ship moved with purpose, placing itself between the Imperial forces and the rest of the unknown fleet. Another transmission arrived. This time the voice was clearer, more practiced with galactic standard. "Final warning. Human expeditionary fleet does not wish conflict. Leave now. Human." The word meant nothing to Torvin. He searched his memory and came up empty. No species called humans existed in Imperial records. Parva worked her console frantically. "Sir, I found a reference. Earth, a planet surveyed 80 years ago during Outer Rim exploration. Classification, pre-spaceflight civilization, no strategic value." "That's impossible," Torvin said. "Pre-spaceflight species don't build fleets like this." But the evidence floated before him on every screen. The solitary human ship waited, its weapons powered but not yet firing. Behind it, hundreds more vessels maintained their positions with mechanical precision. Torvin made his decision. 3rd battle group. Engage the single hostile. Disable if possible. We need answers. As his ships opened fire, Torvin felt certainty slip away. Something was very wrong. The galaxy's order had shifted, and the Empire was about to learn exactly how much had changed while they believed themselves invincible. The human ship began moving, and Torvin's world started falling apart. 47 warships against 1. The mathematics seemed simple enough. Admiral Torvin watched the tactical display as his 3rd battle group formed attack patterns around the single human vessel. Every captain in the formation had years of combat experience. Every ship carried weapons that had shattered rebel fleets and conquered civilizations. The human ship, designated UNS Relentless, hung in space, dwarfed by the Cassidian cruisers surrounding it. Torvin expected either retreat or a desperate final stand. What happened instead rewrote every tactical manual the Empire possessed. The Relentless didn't fire. Instead, thousands of small objects erupted from its hull, like seeds scattered in wind. Cassidian sensors registered them as debris at first, meaningless fragments tumbling through space. "Contact in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. "All ships report weapons locked." The Cassidian fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced across the void, targeting the Relentless with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The human ship moved. That NO vessel that size should have been able to accelerate so quickly. Physics didn't work that way. But the Relentless dodged with impossible precision, its trajectory shifting in ways that should have turned any organic crew into paste against the bulkheads. Then the small objects activated. They weren't debris. Each one was a drone, compact and viciously armed. Thousands of them swarmed across the battlefield with coordination no living pilots could match. They moved as a single organism, flowing around Cassidian ships like water around stones. "Point defense systems engaging," someone reported. The Cassidian ships filled space with defensive fire, shooting down hundreds of drones. But thousands more remained, and they adapted. Each wave learned from the previous one, adjusting approach angles and flight patterns to avoid defensive guns. The first Cassidian cruiser died within 5 minutes. The drones concentrated their fire on a single point in the shield generators, overwhelming the defenses through sheer weight of numbers. When the shields collapsed, the drones poured through and systematically destroyed the ship's weapons engines, and command systems. No wasted shots. No unnecessary destruction. Just efficient, mechanical violence. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Torvin ordered. His voice remained calm through training and discipline, but his hands gripped the command chair's arms until his knuckles ached. The Relentless began firing its main weapons. Rails guns, Torvin realized. Primitive kinetic weapons that hurled solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Primitive, but devastatingly effective. The rounds punched through Cassidian shields like they were made of paper, tearing through armor and internal systems with casual brutality. Within 20 minutes, half the third battle group was destroyed or crippled. Ships tumbled through space, leaking atmosphere and sending distress signals. The drones didn't pursue damaged vessels, didn't finish wounded prey. They simply moved on to the next target with inhuman efficiency that Torvin's tactical officer was shaking. "Sir, we need to withdraw. We can't fight this." "Retreat," Torvin ordered. The word tasted like ashes in his mouth. 300 years without defeat, ended by a single enemy ship. The moment he gave the order, the human attack stopped. The drones pulled back, reforming around the Relentless in defensive patterns. A transmission arrived, the same calm voice as before. "Evacuate your colonies. We will not ask again." The surviving Cassidian ships limped away from the battlefield. Behind them, the Relentless maintained position, its weapons still powered but no longer firing. The message was clear. This was mercy, not weakness, that on the command deck. Parva worked frantically at her station. "Sir, I've been analyzing the intercepted communications from the human ship. Their language is in our database." "What?" Torvin moved to her station. "Explain." "The old survey data from Earth. 80 years ago, our scouts recorded their languages and cultures. These humans are speaking English, one of their major languages. But sir, the survey classified them as primitive. They had barely achieved spaceflight. They were fighting wars with chemical explosives and crude nuclear weapons." Torvin stared at the data. 80 years from nuclear weapons to whatever technology powered that fleet. It was impossible. Most species took thousands of years to develop interstellar capabilities. Even the Cassidians had required millennia of advancement. "Give me everything we have on Earth," he ordered. "Every piece of survey data, every observation, every recorded detail." The files were sparse. Earth was a small planet in an unremarkable system. High gravity by galactic standards. Dangerous native life forms. Volatile weather patterns. The survey team had noted the presence of a single intelligent species, but had classified them as non-threatening and moved on. There were millions of planets in the galaxy. One pre-industrial world didn't warrant attention. Counselor Reshna appeared on the communication screen, her face rigid with fury. "Admiral, explain this disaster immediately." "We encountered a force beyond our tactical capabilities," Torvin said flatly. "I'm gathering intelligence now." "Intelligence?" Reshna's voice rose. "You were beaten by one ship. One ship against 47. The Empire doesn't accept such humiliation. Commit the entire Imperial Navy if necessary." Torvin switched off the communication before he said something that would end his career. He turned back to the sensor displays. Long-range scans showed the human fleet beginning to advance, moving deeper into Imperial territory with deliberate purpose. Captain Bryce commanded the Relentless. That information came through intercepted transmissions. Former Earth Defense Force officer, promoted to Expedition Commander. The name meant nothing to Torvin, but the efficiency of the battle spoke volumes about human military doctrine. His sensor officer made a discovery that turned Torvin's remaining certainty into dust. "Admiral, I've analyzed the human fleet's energy signatures in detail. They're rotating. The ships are operating in shifts." "What does that mean?" "It means they can maintain combat operations indefinitely, sir. They have enough vessels to keep fresh crews always ready. They're not planning a quick strike. They're planning a sustained campaign." Torvin pulled up the strategic maps. The human fleet numbered over 400 capital ships with thousands of support vessels. His officers had counted mobile shipyards capable of constructing new ships and repairing damaged ones. The humans weren't just an invasion force. They were a fully self-sufficient armada, and behind them, somewhere in unexplored space, was Earth, a planet the Empire had dismissed as insignificant. 3 colony worlds had begun evacuation procedures. Millions of Cassidians fleeing from an enemy they didn't understand. Torvin knew the Empire would never accept this. Pride and tradition demanded retaliation. But retaliation against what? An enemy that fought with technology generations beyond Cassidian capabilities? An enemy that had gone from primitive to overwhelming in less than a century. The tactical display showed the human advance continuing. Steady, methodical, unstoppable. Torvin had commanded fleets for 30 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered systems. But watching that advance, he felt something he had never experienced in combat: fear. Emergency sessions usually moved slowly. Politicians debated. Advisors consulted. Procedures were followed with careful precision. This time, the Cassidian War Council assembled in minutes, and the debates were sharp with panicked Dr. Selvon stood before the council with data files that would change everything. He was a xenobiologist, someone who spent his career studying alien life forms across the Empire's territory. Today, he would explain why humanity was different from every species the Empire had encountered. Earth is classified as a Class 12 deathworld. He began without preamble. That designation places it among the most hostile environments in known space. Emperor Caldrus III leaned forward on his throne. Age had not dulled his sharp mind. Explain in practical terms, Doctor. What does that mean? Selvon displayed images from the old survey data. Earth's surface appeared on the screens, showing continents and oceans under swirling white clouds. It looked peaceful until you understood the details. The planet's gravity is 1.4 times our standard. Humans evolved under constant pressure that made them physically stronger than most galactic species. Their atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, which is corrosive at that concentration. They breathe what we would consider industrial oxidizer. Murmurs rippled through the council. Grand Admiral Corson, Supreme Commander of all Cassidian military forces, raised his hand for silence. Continue. Their weather patterns include electrical storms, hurricanes with winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, and temperature variations that would kill most civilized species. Their planet is tectonically active. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions are regular occurrences. Selvon pulled up more data. Images of Earth's native life forms appeared. Massive predators with teeth and claws. Microscopic organisms that cause devastating diseases. Plants that produce deadly toxins. Humans evolved alongside all of this. Their bodies learned to heal rapidly from injuries. Their immune systems fight off pathogens that would kill us within hours. Their psychology adapted to constant threat assessment. They live in a state of permanent vigilance that most species would consider exhausting. But they were primitive, someone objected. The survey said they hadn't even left their planet yet. Selvon nodded. 80 years ago, yes. They had nuclear weapons, but limited space capability. However, consider what nuclear weapons represent. They had learned to split atoms and harness that energy for war. A species doesn't develop such weapons without desperation or genius or both. He displayed more files. These ones pieced together from intercepted human communications. In those 80 years, they went from their first orbital satellites to building interstellar warships. They colonized their entire solar system. They developed faster than light travel. They created technologies that surpass our own in key areas. Impossible, Emperor Caldrus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Selvon challenged. Consider their environment. Every day on Earth was a fight for survival. Every generation faced disasters that would destroy softer species. That kind of pressure doesn't just make bodies stronger. It makes minds sharper. Innovation becomes necessity. Grand Admiral Corson studied the tactical reports from battle. Their fighting style is unusual. Overwhelming force combined with precise strikes. They don't waste ammunition. They don't pursue retreating enemies. It's calculated brutality. They learn to fight by fighting each other, Selvon explained. Humans spent thousands of years waging wars against their own kind. They developed strategy and tactics through endless conflict. By the time they reached space, they had perfected the art of warfare. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had encountered warrior species before, but those species had been primitive or disorganized. Humanity combined aggression with intelligence and technological sophistication. How many humans are there? Emperor Caldrus asked. Selvon checked his data. The old survey estimated 8 billion on Earth alone. Current intercepts suggest they have dozens of colony worlds now, possibly hundreds of billions total population. The numbers were staggering. The entire Cassidian Empire encompassed maybe 50 billion citizens across 200 systems. If humans had similar or greater population with superior technology, the mathematics of warfare became very unfavorable. Lieutenant Hennon, a tactical officer who survived the battle with the Relentless, spoke up. Their ships operate differently than ours. We saw drones that moved within human precision because they were controlled by computers, not pilots. They accept maneuvers that would kill organic crews because their crews are protected by technology we don't have. Or they're expendable, Reshna suggested darkly. Perhaps humans value individual lives less than we do. Selvon shook his head. The intercepted communications suggest otherwise. They stopped firing when our ships retreated. They could have destroyed the entire third battle group, but chose not to. That suggests they do value life, even enemy life. Then why are they here? Emperor Caldrus demanded. What do they want? The answer came from an intelligence officer who had been analyzing human transmissions. They received distress calls. Species that we had conquered sent messages asking for help. The humans responded. The council erupted into argument. The Empire's expansion had always been justified as bringing civilization to primitive worlds. Resistance was crushed because unity required strength. The idea that conquered peoples had called for outside help was embarrassing and infuriating. Grand Admiral Corson raised his voice above the chaos. None of this changes our situation. The human fleet is advancing on Cassidia Prime. We have perhaps 2 weeks before they reach our home system. I propose we gather the entire home fleet here and fortify this system until it becomes unbreakable. How many ships? The Emperor asked. 300 capital ships. Every defensive station we can construct. Minefields, weapon platforms, automated defense grids. We turn Cassidia Prime into a fortress and force them to break themselves against it. Emperor Caldrus considered the proposal. Pride warred with pragmatism in his expression. The Empire had never surrendered, never retreated. 3 centuries of conquest had built a legacy he was not willing to abandon. Make it so, he commanded. Show these deathworlders that we are not so easily broken. The council dispersed to begin preparations. Dr. Selvon remained behind, staring at the images of Earth on his display. He had helped dismiss that planet 8 decades ago. Now its children were coming with fire and steel, and the Empire was scrambling to survive. He wondered if survival was even possible against a species that had learned to thrive on a world designed to kill them. The Cassidians had grown soft, conquering weaker peoples. Humans had grown hard, fighting themselves and their planet. The mathematics of that equation were not encouraging. Outside the council chambers, ships began gathering. Weapons were readied. Soldiers prepared for the greatest battle in Cassidian history. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the human fleet advanced with patient, terrible certainty. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez had fought in 3 wars before leaving Earth's solar system. She understood sieges better than most people understood breathing. Wars were not won by glorious charges and heroic sacrifices. Wars were won by logistics, patience, and the willingness to do ugly work that others found distasteful. The human expeditionary fleet arrived at the edge of the Cassidia Prime system and stopped. Rodriguez studied the defensive network the Cassidians had constructed. Impressive for a species that relied on brute force over cleverness. 300 warships arranged in layered formations. automated defense platforms studying the orbital approaches, minefields scattered across likely attack vectors. If she ordered a direct assault, thousands of humans would die taking this system. She didn't order an assault. Begin construction, she commanded. The fleet's engineering vessels moved into position. Massive drones emerged from cargo holds, carrying raw materials and fabrication equipment. Within hours, structures began taking shape in empty space. Storage depots, repair facilities, manufacturing plants. The humans were building a forward operating base within sight of the enemy capital on Cassidia Prime. Admiral Torvin watched the construction with growing unease. He commanded the home fleet's southern quadrant now, promoted despite his earlier defeat because experienced officers were desperately needed. His tactical officers provided constant updates on human activities. They're not attacking, his second-in-command observed. Why aren't they attacking? Torvin understood military psychology better than most. Because they don't need to, they're showing us they have time. Resources, the ability to build industrial infrastructure faster than we can respond. It's psychological warfare. Days passed. The human forward base grew larger. More ships arrived from deep space, swelling the fleet's numbers. The Cassidians watched and waited, their nerves fraying with each passing hour. Then the probing attacks began. Small human task forces would approach the defensive perimeter, test the automated systems, and withdraw before taking serious damage. Each probe revealed weaknesses in the Cassidian formations. Each skirmish cost Cassidian ships, while human vessels escaped with minor damage. They're learning our patterns, Torvin reported to Grand Admiral Corson. Every attack gives them more data about our capabilities. Corson's face on the communication screen showed the strain of command. Can we stop the probes? Not without committing major forces. And if we do that, we weaken the primary defensive line. Sir, they're playing a different game than we are. We're trying to hold ground. They're trying to break our will. The psychological attacks intensified. Human ships began broadcasting messages in perfect Cassidian language. Recordings of intercepted communications from conquered species, describing imperial brutality. Offers of amnesty for ship captains who abandoned the Empire. Detailed explanations of Earth's history, including their own devastating wars and the lessons learned from them. They're not just fighting us militarily, Torvin explained to his officers. They're fighting us ideologically, making us question whether the Empire deserves defense. Then the humans started throwing rocks. Massive asteroids, accelerated to incredible speeds by mass drivers, came hurtling into the defensive perimeter. The Cassidians had to expend ammunition shooting down what were essentially big stones. Each rock destroyed cost resources the humans could easily replace, but the Cassidians could not point 2 weeks into the siege. Torvin received intelligence that made his blood cold. Human special operations teams had infiltrated the system using captured Cassidian ships. Their target, the planetary shield generator protecting Cassidia Prime from orbital bombardment. He took the information to Corson immediately. We need to increase security around critical infrastructure. The humans are preparing for a decapitation strike. Let them try, Corson said with false confidence. Our ground forces will stop any infiltration. But Torvin had fought humans now. He had seen their capabilities, and he had read the intercepted reports about human soldiers. They operated in environments that would kill Cassidians. They could hold their breath for minutes, survive on minimal oxygen, fight through injuries that would incapacitate other species. Sending human special forces against Cassidian security was like sending wolves against sheep. He began his own investigation, quietly questioning captured human soldiers through intermediaries. One prisoner, a young officer named Walsh, was surprisingly forthcoming. Why are you telling me this? Torvin asked during one interrogation. Walsh shrugged, his alien physiology making the gesture look slightly wrong. Because you're going to figure out anyway. And because maybe you'll make the smart choice. Which is surrender. Your empire is built on conquest and oppression. We came here because the people you conquered asked us to help them. You can't win this. Your emperor is too proud to admit it, but you're not. You've seen what we can do. Torvin left the interrogation room with too many thoughts crowding his mind. He had served the Empire his entire life, believed in its mission to bring order to chaotic space. But the refugees' testimonies the humans broadcast, the evidence of Imperial brutality, forced him to see his civilization through other eyes. 3 weeks into the siege, supplies on Cassidia Prime began running low. The human blockade was absolute. Nothing got in or out. Civilian panic spread through the capital as food rationing began. Emperor Caldrus remained in his palace, refusing to acknowledge the deteriorating situation. Torvin made his decision in the quiet of his personal quarters. He drafted an encrypted message to Fleet Admiral Rodriguez. The words came slowly, each one a betrayal of everything he had been taught to value. I will disable the planetary shield generator. In exchange, you must promise to spare civilian populations and allow honorable surrender. No massacres, no enslavement. The Empire will fall, but my people deserve to survive. He sent the message before courage could fail him. Hours later, Rodriguez's response arrived. Simple and direct. Agreed. Coordinates and timing to follow. The shield generator was heavily guarded, but Torvin had access codes and authority. In the pre-dawn hours of the next day, he arrived at the facility with forged orders and a squad of loyal soldiers. Men and women who trusted him, who believed he was conducting a security inspection. His hands shook as he entered the override commands. Centuries of tradition died with each keystroke. The empire that had seemed eternal crumbled under his fingertips. But he thought of the civilians who would die in a prolonged siege, the soldiers who would be killed in futile defense, the subject peoples who deserved freedom from oppression. The shield flickered and collapsed. Alarms screamed across the capital. Torvin stood in the generator room as security forces rushed toward him, knowing his life was forfeit, but hoping his sacrifice meant something. Above the planet, human dropships entered the atmosphere. They moved with surgical precision toward the Imperial Palace. No bombardment, no mass destruction, just targeted insertion of soldiers who would end this war with minimal bloodshed. Admiral Torvin was arrested within minutes. As guards dragged him away, he looked up at the sky where human ships now flew freely. He had betrayed everything he knew, but perhaps betrayal was the right choice when the alternative was watching his civilization destroy itself through pride. Emperor Caldrus watched from his throne room as armored figures breached the palace doors. The age of empire was ending. Something new was beginning, and Torvin had chosen which side of history he wanted to stand on. Emperor Caldrus III had imagined this moment many times during the siege. Execution by firing squad, public humiliation, chains and darkness. What he never imagined was sitting in his own throne room across a table from Fleet Admiral Rodriguez, drinking water and having a conversation like civilized beings. The human officer had dismissed her security detail after ensuring the palace was secure. She sat alone with the Emperor, her posture relaxed but alert. Her species looked strange to Cassidian eyes, with their flat faces and unusual proportions. But her eyes carried intelligence and something else. Compassion, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion. "You're not what I expected," Caldrus said finally. The admission felt like defeat, but also like relief. Rodriguez smiled slightly. "What did you expect? Monsters? Conquerors? Yes. No point in lying now. Your fleet destroyed mine. Your soldiers took my capital. I assumed you would act like any successful invader. We're not invaders." Rodriguez pulled up a datapad and slid it across the table. "These are our terms. Read them." Caldrus studied the document with growing confusion. Dissolution of forced vassalage agreements. Self-determination for conquered species. Reparations paid to victims of imperial expansion. But no mention of Cassidian enslavement or resource extraction or puppet governments. "I don't understand. You won. Why aren't you taking control?" "Because we didn't come here to build an empire." Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. "We came because people asked us for help. Species your empire had conquered sent distress calls to human space. We couldn't ignore that. So this was about them, not us. This was about stopping oppression. Your empire has conquered 12 species over 3 centuries, forced them into servitude, suppressed their cultures. We've read the testimonies. The evidence is overwhelming. Calders felt old anger rising. We brought order to chaos, civilization to primitive worlds. The Empire made the galaxy better. Did you ask them if they wanted your civilization? Rodriguez's voice remained calm but firm. Self-determination means choice. You didn't give them choice. You gave them conquest. The words struck harder than any weapon. Calders had spent his reign justifying expansion as benevolent, convinced himself that resistance was ignorance and submission was enlightenment. Facing someone who rejected those foundations entirely made the rationalizations sound hollow. What happens to me, he asked. You'll stand trial for war crimes. Representatives from all affected species will participate. If found guilty, you'll face appropriate punishment. But your people won't be punished for your actions. Calders looked up sharply. You're separating me from my people. We're separating leadership from population. The Cassidian people didn't make policy decisions. They followed orders from their government. We have no interest in collective punishment. Outside the palace, the reality of Rodriguez's words became visible. Human medical teams moved through Cassidia Prime streets, treating wounded from both sides with equal care. Engineers repaired damaged infrastructure. Supply ships delivered food to relieve the shortages caused by the siege. Refugees from conquered species arrived, but instead of revenge, they came to witness justice. Admiral Torvin stood in a detention cell, expecting execution for his betrayal. Instead, Rodriguez came to visit him. You saved a lot of lives, she said through the cell's communication system. The planetary shield would have forced us into prolonged bombardment. Thousands would have died. I betrayed my oath, Torvin replied. I deserve whatever punishment comes. You chose conscience over orders. That takes courage. Rodriguez paused. We're going to need people who understand both sides of this conflict. People who can bridge the gap between the Empire and the species it conquered. Are you interested in helping? Torvin stared at her. Why would you trust me? Because you made the hard choice when it mattered. That tells me more about your character than any oath. Across the former Empire, similar scenes played out. Human forces secured strategic locations, but didn't occupy them. They facilitated meetings between subject species and former Cassidian administrators. Encouraged dialogue instead of imposing solutions. The humans seemed genuinely committed to letting liberated peoples decide their own futures. Dr. Selvon received an invitation to meet with human scientists. He accepted nervously, expecting interrogation. Instead, he found himself in a laboratory discussing deathworld biology with enthusiastic researchers who actually wanted to learn from him. Your survey work was actually quite good, a human biologist named Dr. Okafor explained. You just didn't have the context to understand what you were seeing. Earth's harsh environment pushed our evolution in unique directions. We'd like to study Cassidia Prime's biology to understand your evolutionary path. You want to study us? Selvon couldn't hide his surprise. We lost the war. Science doesn't care about politics, Okafor said cheerfully. Every species has valuable knowledge. We can learn from each other. The transition happened faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, the Cassidian Empire's formal structure dissolved. Individual systems held referendums on their future. Some chose independence. Others formed new alliances. The Cassidians themselves voted to establish a republic, rejecting imperial rule for representative government. Not everyone accepted the changes peacefully. Resistance cells formed, Cassidian loyalists who refused to acknowledge defeat. But they found little popular support. The population was exhausted from war and ready for change. Emperor Calders watched from comfortable detention as his empire transformed into something new. His trial date approached. Representatives from all 12 conquered species would sit in judgment. He would have to answer for decisions made decades ago, policies he had thought were righteous at the time. Rodriguez visited him one final time before the trial began. Do you understand now? Why we came? Calders considered the question carefully. You came because someone had to stop us. The Empire had become what it fought against. We became oppressors in the name of order. Yes, and because we learned that lesson ourselves. Humans nearly destroyed Earth fighting each other. We barely survived our own worst impulses. When we reached space and found other species making the same mistakes, we couldn't just watch. Your planet taught you mercy by teaching you cruelty first. Something like that. Rodriguez stood to leave. The galaxy is bigger than any empire, more complex than any simple ideology. We're all trying to survive out here. The question is whether we do it by conquering each other or protecting each other. She left Caldrus with that thought. Through the detention center's window, he could see human and Cassidian workers repairing damage side by side. Former enemies becoming something else. Not friends yet, maybe not for generations, but not enemies anymore either. The Empire had fallen. Something new was rising. And Caldrus realized that maybe that was how it should be. Empires rose and fell, but life continued. The galaxy turned, indifferent to pride and conquest. Humanity hadn't destroyed the Cassidians. They had forced them to change, which might have been the greater mercy. Outside, the work of building a new galactic order continued. And for the first time in centuries, that order would be built on consent rather than conquest. 3 months changed the galaxy more than 3 centuries had. The space station where representatives gathered was neutral territory, constructed specifically for this purpose. 32 species sent delegates to what was being called the First Galactic Assembly. Some came with hope, others with suspicion. All came because the alternative was watching history happen without them. Admiral Torvin wore civilian clothes now, representing the new Cassidian Republic rather than the fallen empire. Walking into the assembly chamber felt surreal. Species' government had conquered Sat as equals. Former subject peoples who had lived under Cassidian rule now debated as free citizens of independent worlds. Ambassador Liang stood at the central podium. The human diplomat had spent her career managing colony disputes and negotiating trade agreements. She looked uncomfortable with the attention, but determined to see this through. We propose the alliance of free worlds, she began. A voluntary association based on mutual defense and cooperation. No species has authority over another. No central government. Just coordination for common benefit. The chamber erupted into discussion. Representatives argued over details, questioned terms, proposed amendments. Democracy was messy and slow and frustrating. It was also the opposite of imperial rule, which Torvin was learning to appreciate. That a delegate from one of the liberated species stood to speak. How do we prevent another empire from rising? How do we ensure this freedom lasts? You can't, Liang answered honestly. Freedom requires constant effort. The moment you stop defending it, someone will try to take it away. But that's why we're proposing mutual defense. An attack on one member is treated as an attack on all. And who leads this alliance? Another delegate asked. No one, or everyone, depending how you look at it. Each member has equal voice in council decisions. We're not building a hierarchy. We're building a network. The debates continued for days. Humans participated but didn't dominate. They offered suggestions rather than demands. Liang made it clear repeatedly that humanity had no interest in replacing the Cassidian Empire with a human doctor. Selvon found himself working alongside human scientists in laboratories that mixed technologies from dozens of species. The collaborative research produced insights no single civilization could achieve alone. Deathworld biology became a recognized field of study, with Earth as the primary example, but not the only one. We found 3 other species that evolved on high-gravity, dangerous worlds, Dr. Okafor explained during one research session. Each developed unique adaptations. The galaxy is more diverse than anyone realized because empires only contacted species they could conquer. How many civilizations were ignored because they weren't threats? Selvon wondered aloud. Hundreds, probably. Maybe thousands. The assembly is starting to map unexplored regions. We'll likely discover species that have been developing in isolation for millennia. Former Emperor Caldrus stood trial as promised. The proceedings were broadcast across the former empire. Representatives from conquered species testified about imperial policies and their impacts. Caldrus listened without defending himself, finally understanding the pain his government had caused. The verdict was guilty on multiple charges. The sentence was house arrest on Cassidia Prime for the remainder of his life, with mandatory participation in reconciliation programs. No execution, no torture, just consequences and the requirement to face what he had done. "I don't forgive you," one victim told him during a reconciliation session, "but I'm glad you have to live with this knowledge. Death would be easier than understanding." Caldrus agreed. Death would have been much easier. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez retired from military command and accepted a teaching position at the new Interspecies Academy. Students from across the former empire and beyond came to learn about warfare, diplomacy, and the lessons Earth had learned through its own bloody history. "Violence is easy," she told her first class. "Any species can destroy. Building is harder. Building with former enemies is hardest of all. But it's the only way forward that doesn't end in everyone's extinction." The Alliance of Free Worlds officially formed 6 months after the Empire's fall. 28 species joined immediately. Others remained independent, but established diplomatic relations. Humanity became one voice among many, influential but not dominant. Then the sensors detected something new, a distress call from the Outer Rim. An unknown force was attacking a mining colony. The colony belonged to a species that hadn't joined the Alliance yet, but that didn't matter. Within minutes, ships from 6 different species scrambled to respond. Human vessels launched alongside Cassidian ships, former enemies now flying as allies. The response fleet included technology and tactics from multiple civilizations working in coordination. Admiral Torvin commanded one of the Cassidian ships in the relief force. He found himself taking orders from a human tactical coordinator and giving orders to ships from liberated species. The mixing of cultures and technologies felt natural now, no longer strange. "All ships, jump on my mark," the human coordinator ordered. The fleet entered faster than light travel as one unit, heading toward unknown danger together on the space station. Ambassador Leong watched the fleet depart. Ambassador roles suited her better than she expected, not because she enjoyed politics, but because she believed in what they were building. A galaxy where differences were strengths rather than reasons for conflict. "The age of empires is over," she said during her closing speech to the assembled delegates. "Some of you remember when one species dominated others through force. That's finished. Not because humans defeated an empire, but because enough people decided they wanted something better." She paused, looking across the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds. "A year ago, you saw our Armada and thought we were conquerors. You wonder how deathworlders could challenge an empire. The truth is simple. We didn't come because we're stronger. We came because we learned something on our violent world that applies everywhere. The only way to survive monsters is to protect each other from them." The Assembly voted to establish permanent coordination centers across Alliance space. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs launched. Military cooperation expanded beyond crisis response to joint training and shared technology development. Not everyone was happy. Some species resented human influence. Some Cassidians mourned the lost empire. Some humans worried about overreach and imperial ambitions creeping back. But the momentum toward cooperation proved stronger than the pull toward isolation. Dr. Selvon published his research on deathworld species and their unique perspectives. The work became required reading across the Alliance. Understanding that suffering could create wisdom rather than just pain helped species appreciate what survivors brought to civilization. Former Emperor Caldrus wrote his memoirs from house arrest. They became surprisingly popular, read by students studying the transition from imperial rule to democratic cooperation. His honesty about mistakes and rationalizations helped others recognize similar patterns in their own societies. The relief fleet returned victorious from the Outer Rim. They had driven off raiders and rescued the colony. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the Alliance was real. Different species could fight together effectively, protecting each other regardless of political affiliation. Admiral Torvin looked at the mixed crews celebrating their success and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real hope that maybe this time, galactic civilization could build something lasting. Not an empire enforced through conquest, but an alliance maintained through choice. The galaxy remained dangerous. Unexplored regions held unknown threats. Ancient technologies still awaken occasionally. But now multiple species faced those dangers together, sharing knowledge and resources and the determination to survive. Humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson about deathworlders. They didn't just survive harsh environments. They learned to protect others because survival meant nothing without community. That lesson was spreading now, carried by species who had been enemies and were learning to become something more. The Age of Alliance had begun.